Thanks, Harry. Rushanara, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I'm going to focus my questions mainly on the government's economic crime plan and progress on that. So can perhaps Graham, if you could start off with giving an update on whether you think the government's on course to implement the plan and what are the significant barriers, and then if others could come in with comments on that question as well, please.
Thank you. So I think we're broadly on course. We're just one player in this. As you'll have seen, there are 7 themes across the report, and there's transparency and supervision, international action, and things which are less core to law enforcement. But broadly, there has been pretty good progress. RUSI has been helping and challenging us by providing a quarterly update in public on what they assess to be our progress, and you can see there a good number of actions completed, quite a few that are ongoing, and critique from them. I think we've done a good job in improving our understanding of economic crime. One of the recommendations of this committee previously is that we should come up with better overall estimates of the scale, particularly of money laundering. That is really hard, so we are struggling with doing that. But beginning to get under the skin of where elements of it are coming from, we are doing. We have made some much better assessments now of the scale of money laundering, cash money laundering in this country, on the back of crime in this country, as opposed to money that comes from other countries. And I can go into that in some detail if you want. So our understanding has improved. Our collective action to respond, I think, has improved with the NEC and all the organisations working with it. I think Companies House reform is, as I mentioned earlier on, one of the most significant things. If that can be driven through, that will fundamentally help us.
Andrew, do you want to come in? And then I've got some questions for Patrick.
Yeah, thank you. So I think one of the key elements of the plan was improving the police response. So I think I touched on a couple of elements of that earlier on, and I do think our police response to economic crime is improving. As I mentioned, we have now got a national strategy with implementation plans. We are seeing an increase in the volume of resources that are managing this threat. But I think the key thing that I would highlight is that within the City of London Police, we have made efforts to improve the action fraud service as well. And if that's the gateway for people to come into the service, it's important that that is right. So we had commissioned the Craig Mackey report, or the Corporation of City of London had commissioned the Craig Mackey report and gave us recommendations on how we could improve the action fraud centres and that general process, and indeed the victim care elements of it. So I do think we're making improvements across policing. I think there is a lot more that can.
Am I right in thinking that the Action 26, the improving the police response to fraud, it's overdue, is our understanding, by a year? I mean, is that because of COVID pressures and other pressures? Do you think that? What are the reasons for the delay?
So I think there's a number of things that have prevented us from taking that forward as quickly or as effectively as we would want to. As I say, I do think there is an improvement happening. I haven't actually been through a meeting cycle yet of this, so I'll have more information as this progresses, and perhaps it's something that we could put some additional evidence forward on, if that would be helpful for the committee. I don't think we can blame COVID for not taking things forward. I think, if anything, policing has continued regardless of COVID. But I do think we are seeing improvements. I think, as I say, we've seen some improvements to the action fraud service. We are seeing buy-in from.
That's really encouraging. I mean, I've been on this committee for some time, and I was on the committee for the previous inquiry. And what seemed to me to be a running theme, and it's not a criticism of the work that the police do, but the City of London Police doesn't seem to have the same sort of hasn't had the same traction that in the US, for instance, in the US they've managed to go after after those who are involved in economic crime and get them prosecuted, and there seems to be an issue. Do you think that's about what the police can do, or are there still systemic barriers to actually getting prosecutions, because we don't seem to succeed? And the FinCEN papers and the response from the US authorities highlighted some of those challenges. Where is the problem here? Because it does feel like, despite the good work you're all doing, we're not getting as far as we should be. And Angela mentioned the £40 billion gap, and it's much wider when we look more broadly at this issue.
So I think that this is an area, and I think Graham touched on it earlier on, I think it is an area that has been under-resourced historically. So I think there is a need to put more resources into this area to allow us to put more reports forward. I think as a consequence of that, as I've mentioned already, we are looking to put more resources into this space, but we are competing for resources against other priorities. And every force has a number of priorities that they have to manage constantly. We need more investigators, but we know there's a shortage of investigators across England and Wales. So we have looked to increase training and put out additional training in the economic crime space. So I think we need to do a combination of things. I think some of that has been covered already, but a lot of it is about putting increased resources.
Just to pick up on this point about resources, the government's planning to introduce an economic crime levy to support the economic crime plan. How much is going to be generated from it, and what will you get? What will the police get, if anything, from that? Is that going to be sufficient?
Shall
I
pick
don't
up on
Source question.
Graham might want to come in on that.
Briefly, and I want to get on to Scotland.
So very briefly, the government said it will look to raise £100 million from the levy, but that is levied. The intent is on the money laundering sector and to be spent on money laundering explicitly, not fraud. There'll be some crossover, but it is not a sustainable solution to how we fund fraud law enforcement activity in this country. And they've, as part of the consultation, they've asked for ideas on how that might happen.
And so Angela's talked about resource implications for law enforcement. How much is needed, and what are the ideas that you're proposing, just briefly?
So the 5-point plan that I was talking about earlier on is what we would propose. We had a bid prepared to go into the spending review when it was a multi-year spending review. That
how much were you asking for?
Well, it would be in the kind of low hundreds of millions across law enforcement.
Sorry, can you be specific? How much have you asked for? Because we can reiterate this point in this inquiry and reinforce that argument. I think we need tangibles, because otherwise we're gonna, this is the second inquiry that's been done on my watch from this committee, and we need to move forward. How much did you ask for?
It was a dance of how much we thought we would get versus how much I think it was 80 million that we pitched for in the end, but I would have to check that and confirm. Of course, that is the kind of debate we tend to have more privately with the government, but per annum. Yeah, that was what we felt was a modest investment in making a material difference. Yeah. We could do a lot more with more money.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Patrick Campbell, can I turn to you? And I'd be grateful. Obviously, the plan is focused on England. Could you tell us how it works in Scotland and what sort of resources are applied in the Scottish context to deal with economic crime, and what we can learn from the Scottish experience and vice versa, and how much cooperation is going on in terms of joint working and learning and addressing some of these issues?
Yeah, no problem at all. Good afternoon. So the economic crime plan, we have our own in Scotland just now, which has been pulled together by ourselves, Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service and Scottish Government, and it broadly reflects the UK economic crime plan with the main themes and priorities around that. The model in Scotland regarding resources is probably twofold. Where I am just now, the Scottish Crime Campus is located within just outside Glasgow. We have 27 law enforcement agencies all located within the one location, all targeting serious and organised crime. And within this area, we have our Economic Crime and Financial Investigation Unit, which is about 150 officers who are targeting SOC-related high-level fraud. Our model is different from down south in England and Wales, where we basically are a national force here, and with the national force brings obvious advantages in that respect. We also are frontline responders, so 17,000 officers who are that frontline are trained up at the Scottish Police College in respect of fraud investigations. So we have that frontline response in respect of all investigations. Regarding our interaction with the rest of the UK, we link very, very closely with Graham and the team. We sit in a number of his boards, and we sit in all the various NPCC forums, the National Police Chiefs Council forums in respect of that fraud targeting and environment.
Great, thank you. I think my time's up, but thank you very much for your responses.
Rushanara, thank you.